Brooklyn Beckham says he has reached the end of his relationship with his family. The words are deliberate, final in tone, and heavy with consequence. What follows, however, is not the response many expected. There are no public denials, no emotional appeals, no attempts to reclaim the narrative through interviews or statements. Instead, David and Victoria Beckham remain outwardly silent. Not absent, but restrained. Their response is measured, and it suggests something quieter and more complex than confrontation, a decision to hold position without forcing reconciliation, to remain present without pressing closer. When Brooklyn speaks, there is no ambiguity. His account is detailed, unresolved, and deeply personal. He describes a childhood shaped by control, by expectations that blurred the line between family and brand. He frames his marriage as the breaking point, alleging that his parents sought to undermine it, and he makes clear that reconciliation is not what he wants. The force of his words lies not only in what he accuses them of, but in the certainty with which he closes the door. And yet, in contrast, his parents do not answer in kind. There is no escalation, no public defense. What unfolds instead is a carefully maintained stillness. To understand that silence, it helps to return to the moment where the fracture appears to deepen. In April 2022, Brooklyn marries Nicola Peltz at her family's estate in Palm Beach. To the outside world, it is an immaculate, carefully staged celebration. For Brooklyn, it later becomes something else entirely. He describes the wedding as the moment he understood that his wife would never be fully accepted, that private tensions surfaced publicly, and that a line was crossed from which the relationship did not recover. He speaks of humiliation, of a moment meant to unite instead becoming a source of lasting injury. What stands out is not only the accusation itself, but the absence of any immediate reply. David and Victoria offer no correction, no alternative account, no attempt to repair the damage in public view. They withdraw. The quiet that follows appears deliberate. Their first visible response is not explanation, but memory. Days after Brooklyn's statement circulates, a story resurfaces from a 2006 photo shoot. David stands with his back to the camera, his children's names tattooed across his skin. The photographer recalls a brief interruption, young Brooklyn running in, clinging to his father, a spontaneous moment of closeness. Victoria responds simply, with 4 words that carry no context beyond the past, brings back great memories. David echoes it. No reference to the present conflict. No acknowledgement of the accusations. Just a shared recollection. It is a subtle gesture, one that shifts the frame away from dispute and toward history, away from argument and toward what once existed. In public, David becomes even more careful with language. When speaking about parenting, about social media, about the difficulty of raising children in the public eye, he avoids names. He speaks in generalities, about mistakes, about growth, about learning when to step back. There is no assignment of blame, no suggestion of injury. The posture is calm, almost neutral, but it carries intention. He presents himself not as a man defending his image, but as a father acknowledging complexity. That restraint is most visible when the spotlight is at its brightest. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, questions are inevitable. Brooklyn's words are recent, widely circulated, impossible to ignore. Yet when asked directly, David does not engage. He redirects, offering polite conversation in place of commentary. This is not evasion in the usual sense. It is containment, a refusal to let the conflict expand under scrutiny, a choice to keep certain things unsaid, even when silence itself becomes the message. Any direct response, they understand, would only widen the fracture. Escalation would harden positions, not resolve them. And that is precisely what David and Victoria appear intent on avoiding. Privately, the message has remained steady. They want contact. They want conversation. They want a way forward. But they are careful not to pursue it in public view. The restraint is deliberate. Every choice seems designed to preserve the possibility of return without forcing it into a confrontation Brooklyn has already rejected. At the same time, Victoria's attention turns outward. She reappears alongside the Spice Girls. She shares moments of support for her other children. She presents herself composed, socially connected, and intact. This is not withdrawal, nor is it performance for sympathy. It is positioning, an assertion that the family continues to exist, continues to function, continues to hold space, without pleading and without assigning blame. The message is implicit rather than stated. The structure remains, even in absence. Brooklyn's position, by contrast, expands beyond emotion into questions of power. He does not only describe control in personal terms, but in professional ones. He suggests pressure around the use of his name, around branding decisions that, in his view, placed legacy ahead of autonomy. These claims cut close to the foundation of David and Victoria's public identity. Once again, they choose not to answer directly. There is no rebuttal, no attempt to dismantle the accusation point by point. Instead, clarification emerges quietly, framed as administrative history rather than conflict, an issue rooted in long-standing trademark arrangements, not coercion. The language remains neutral, procedural, almost clinical. There is no emotional counterweight offered. De-escalation takes precedence over vindication. Then there is Nicola Peltz. Brooklyn maintains that he is acting of his own will, yet the timeline reveals a pattern. As Nicola's presence becomes central, boundaries harden. Contact becomes regulated. Communication is formalized. Legal instructions replace informal exchange. Family members are blocked. Public distance grows. Brooklyn aligns himself fully with his wife's world, private, structured, and protected by resources that favor containment over dialogue. From David and Victoria's perspective, this creates a precarious balance. To push risks validating Brooklyn's sense of control. To remain silent risks permanent loss. They choose neither extreme. Instead, they settle into patience. They return to memory. They speak about parenting in abstract terms. They resist transforming the rupture into a public battle, even as Brooklyn states plainly that reconciliation is not his goal. The door is not closed. It is left unlocked, but unattended. This is the long view. A belief that anger exhausts itself more quickly than attachment. That certainty can erode with time. That what confrontation would calcify, distance might slowly soften. Every action, and every omission, points toward a single intention, that if Brooklyn ever decides to return, he will not be returning to hostility, but to continuity. What complicates this further is the nature of the Beckhams themselves. They are not only parents, but a global institution shaped by control, precision, and narrative discipline. In this moment, they deliberately refuse to deploy the tools that built that institution. There are no legal offensives, no coordinated defenses, no public corrections. The restraint is not weakness. It is strategy. They appear to understand that challenging Brooklyn's account outright could push him irrevocably toward the life he has chosen with Nicola, and once that shift becomes final, the separation may no longer be reversible. So the pressure remains indirect. Victoria's social media does not address Brooklyn by name, but it amplifies family history, shared moments, visible unity. The implication is quiet but persistent. Absence does not erase belonging. David mirrors this restraint. When he speaks about growth, mistakes, and the necessity of space. He does not cast himself as wronged. He does not cast his son as misguided. The refusal to assign blame is intentional, because blame fixes positions that patience keeps fluid. Behind closed doors, the fear is unmistakable. They do not want to lose their son. They want dialogue. They want healing. But they refuse to pursue it in a way that would confirm the very control Brooklyn says he is escaping. And this is where Nicola's influence becomes central. The boundaries in place are not spontaneous, they are structured. This is a world where conflict is managed through distance and documentation, not conversation. Brooklyn, now fully within that framework, appears to have adopted its logic. From the outside, the result is a quiet standoff. The longer Brooklyn remains insulated within Nicola's orbit, the more difficult re-entry becomes without appearing intrusive. In response, David and Victoria adjust their focus. They reinforce the family around the absence rather than chasing the absence itself. Not to erase him, but to endure. Romeo and Cruz continue to appear in public life much as they always have, present, supported, visible. Harper remains carefully shielded. The family structure holds. The routine continues. Not as an act of exclusion, but as a signal. Life has not unraveled in Brooklyn's absence. This is not indifference. It is a form of leverage. Guilt does not respond well to pressure. It responds to distance, to the quiet realization that the world keeps moving even when one steps away from it. At the same time, David and Victoria avoid inflaming the business dimension of the dispute. As questions circulate about trademarks and the boundaries of the Beckham name, they do not counterattack. They allow clarification to surface discreetly, framed in administrative terms rather than emotional ones. Again, the pattern holds: containment over conflict, de-escalation over defense. Brooklyn's own words reveal the central contradiction of the rift. He insists he does not want reconciliation. He describes his actions as self-assertion. Yet the tone of his message is unmistakably emotional, shaped by unresolved hurt, by humiliation, by a need to be heard and believed. This is not the language of detachment. It is the language of someone who has not fully let go. It is the voice of someone seeking acknowledgement, but only on his terms. David and Victoria appear to understand that public acknowledgement would ring hollow, even manipulative, under these circumstances. So they keep their response private, or as private as it can be under relentless scrutiny. Even when moments arise where public defense might seem justified, the disputed details of a wedding, the interpretation of a shared memory, they decline to engage. They do not correct timelines. They do not offer competing versions of events. They allow ambiguity to stand. Because they recognize something fundamental, public arguments calcify private pain. Instead, they place their faith in time. Time for anger to dull. Time for certainty to erode. Time for distance to reveal its own weight. Time for the conviction of separation to soften into doubt. Nicola's role in this dynamic cannot be ignored. From Brooklyn's perspective, she is the one who stood beside him when he felt unheard, who validated his experience, who provided structure and protection. That loyalty carries enormous force, and for now, it is unshakable. But it also complicates any path forward. Reconciliation, if it were to happen, would require more than forgiving his parents. It would require renegotiating his sense of independence within his marriage. And that is where the tension tightens. Any quiet reconnect ion with David and Victoria risks weakening the finality of his public stance, making his declaration feel less absolute. Nicola understands this. And so, while the Beckhams wait, she maintains distance, legal, emotional, structural. Not loudly, not aggressively, but firmly. What emerges is a quiet standoff. On one side, patience, memory, and restraint. On the other, boundaries, silence, and closure. And in between, a sun suspended between identity and origin. What gives this conflict its weight is not the accusations themselves, nor the headlines they generate, but the opposing strategies at play. One side waits. The other closes doors. The unanswered question is which posture endures longer. Anger is visible, but it is finite. Silence is less dramatic, but it persists. David and Victoria are betting that time will succeed where confrontation would fail, that if Brooklyn ever returns, it will not be because he was compelled, but because he chose to. Whether that wager holds remains unknown. What is clear is that this is no longer a family shouting across the media. It is something colder, slower, and more deliberate, a long, careful chess game, conducted almost entirely in silence.